Chris, how much did PG prove to you during this playoff run, if anything?
Look, you just said it, Jen. He played poorly last night, and you read off the numbers and all of that.
Yeah.
But I believe that Paul George helped himself in these playoffs. And look, I don't hold him to the same standard as Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or even Giannis, Steph, Kawhi, James Harden, guys like that. They're better than him. They're on another level from Paul George. But I do think he helped himself because if you think about what his reputation and stature was coming into this season off the bubble, okay, where he went, 10 points, 4 for 16 in Game 7 against Denver in the second round in a series that they just choked away. He's hitting the side of the backboard on some of his shots. There's no way he goes into next season with the same status. I think he earned the public's respect. I think he earned some players' respect by the way he played in these playoffs. He averaged 27 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists in these playoffs. And he put himself in some historic company. For him to score 20 or more points in every playoff game, 19 of them in all, joining only Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan to ever do that, for him to put up numbers in Game 5 that we've never seen in the 74-year history of the NBA, I got to give him props for that. Now, do I think he's a number one? Do I think he can lead your team to a championship? No. He still can't do that. But I think he's a heck of a number two. And I think coming off of these playoffs, I think his confidence will be better. I think his teammates' confidence in him will be greater. Ty Lue's confidence in him, greater. And I think Paul and Kawhi will come back next year and play the best basketball that they have played together as a duo. So I think Paul George really helped himself.
But sure hope so. It went from Kawhi Town, and we got next. We up now to Georgetown, to somebody town. Now it's a ghost town. Gotta clip us out of there.
And Lagon is gone.
Hey, Chris, for me, when I look at Paul George is exactly who I thought he was. I thought he was a great player to begin with, and I still do. And I agree with what you said. I don't look at him as a true number one. Paul George is you get Paul George, you're automatically in title contention. And the likelihood of him being able to put together historic performances like he did in Game 5, to bring that back, Skip, like Chris was saying, Jordan does that. LeBron, Kevin Durant, you talk about the best, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, the best of the best. We're talking about Pantheon players now. Paul George is not a Pantheon player. I was just disappointed that I thought he would be more aggressive. He went out very meekly last night. He had 6 points in the first half, Chris. You don't go, I'm going down swinging. Everybody say, man, he was ball hogging. He shot too many times. And because I felt that was the best way for us to win. He wanted everybody else to see if everybody else could get going and he could relax. They made him uncomfortable early. Nobody else really got it going, although Boogie was played well again. Then Marcus Morris started to come along. Reggie Jackson didn't get off to his typical hot start that he normally does. He played okay. But Paul George was the guy that they were counting on to give them a very similar performance to what he gave them in Game 5. And he did not. Basically, he went back. If you go back and look at him since Kawhi went out, he just played like he played in Indiana. He was Indiana George. He's like, I'm the best player on the court. This is what I'm capable of doing. And he did it. So I don't look at Paul George anyway. I thought he was a great guy. Yeah, I call him Polyester P. But he's a phenomenal talent. He's just not the guy. And as long as you understand he's not the guy, he's more than a guy, but he's just not that. He's not Kawhi. He's not LeBron. He's not Dame. He's not Steph. So for me, I didn't lose any respect for him. And all of a sudden, it's not like, well, man, Paul George, he really impressed me. I've seen him. I saw what he did with the Big Three Heat. I saw that with my own eyes. And he took them to a Game 7. I don't care what anybody tells me. The Big Three Heat were better than the Suns. And he took them to a Game 7 with less talent. Because he had, come on now. Roy Hibbert, I think Lance Stevens was on that team. Come on now, Chris. Well, who we kidding?
George Hill.
Yeah. Who we kidding? That team that he took 7 games with the Heat was less talented than this Clippers team. But give him credit. He played well in spots, but that game he needed to be more aggressive and give me more than what he gave me.
Okay. I believe Shannon Sharpe has gained so much respect for Paul George that he, through this show today, has been putting him in the same sentence with LeBron James all day long. And I appreciate that very much. Paul appreciates that.
No, you don't want to talk about
elevated him into conversation with LeBron.
Chris,
way to go.
Who was that the other day talking about that was a LeBron James-esque performance? Oh, he's a this and that. And Boogie Cousins talking about we were trying to critique players. Now, I want to see Boogie. Boogie, what should I say about Paul George today? Because you wanted me to give him his flowers on 2 days ago. So how should I critique his play today? Get back to me if you can.
Well, I'm back to you right now that Paul George has always been supremely talented.
Yes.
He is 6'8". He's long. He can steal the ball. He can shoot the ball in ways even LeBron has never thought about shooting the ball because he's got serious three-point range. And when he gets cooking, he can really cook. And we saw it in all its glory in Game 5. The disappointment is, even though I thought he grew up and toughened up this year and grew a little deeper backbone this year, that after he went for that historic 41-13-6 in Game 5, and they pull up the huge upset at Phoenix, then he rested on his laurels last night. I don't think he cared how he played last night because he is a complimentary star. And he thought, I've done all I need to do to keep my critics at bay.
Right.
And now I can rest on my laurels. I can just sort of cruise through this game. He came out in slow motion. It looked like he was sleepwalking in the first half. And I don't want to see it because it's not, you're not made of that stuff that you're talking about that the superstars are made of. Whatever Chris Paul is made of, Paul George is not made of. And it was disheartening to me. It was sorely disappointing to me to watch him just say, I'm fine. And he readily acknowledged after the game, I came up short again.
Right.
I came up short again. You're willing to say that without any pain in your voice at all. I came up short again.
But when we mention it, we don't know what we're talking about. And we need to give a guy. Now, that's what he said, Chris. He said he came up short again. Basically, what we've been saying all along, that Paul George came up short. But when we said, man, y'all know what y'all casuals. Y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Y'all don't know who. Well, he just said what we've been saying for the last 6-7 years.
Okay. So, without Kawhi, over these 8 games, it was 5-6 against Utah and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against Phoenix. Paul George averaged 30, 11, and 6. Well, that's pretty great. Right? You can't just find those numbers under any palm tree out here in Los Angeles, right? So the point is, while he was doing so, his three-point shooting got worse and worse over games 2 through 6 against Phoenix. He shot 23% from 3. That's 9 of 40. That just won't get it.
Right.
And I told you earlier, if you'd made 15 of 40, we might be having a different conversation. But you didn't because you were a 41% regular season three-point shooter who shot 23% over the most crucial games of the playoff run. That's who he is and who I guess he will always be.
Chris, I think you're letting Paul George off the hook. And let me tell you why. Because Kawhi's gone. And so now there's not the expectations there that would have been there with Kawhi. And I told y'all this yesterday. I say now the expectations. Can you replicate what you did in Game 5? Can you do that in Game 6? And he could not. You see, if they lose to Utah, is anybody going to hold that against Paul George? Because Utah is the #1 seed. They had won the most games in the NBA. So if he loses that game, what's to be said? If he loses to the Suns, ain't nobody going to say anything. Well, they didn't have Kawhi. They didn't have Serge Ibaka. They didn't have Zubac. So now we get a series. It's 3-2. You got the game in your home court. The expectations which you have set, considering how well you played, and especially how well you played in Game 5. Okay, now, Paul George, we want to see what you got. And what did he do? Right on cue. What did he do, Skip?
I agree. I agree with you. And we talked about that before, Shannon. If you look throughout his playoff career, he's been best when there were no expectations. You keep bringing up the Heat. Nobody expected him to beat the Heat.
Zero.
So he plays great. All right, and then you're absolutely right from Game 5 to Game 6. But look, he obviously was up and down, even as he scored 20 or more points in every game. His shooting percentage and everything was fluctuated all the time. But I got to keep it real. If you go back and look at some of the shooting for everybody, from Jordan on down, they all had some bad shooting performances in the playoffs. Not as many as Paul George.
Right.
He's got, I think, it might be the record.
He got 11, in which he shot 25% or less.
Shooting. Right. But Bird, Jordan, LeBron, they all had some games where they didn't shoot well in the playoffs. Durant. So it's understanding what level of player he is. If you came into this game after game 5 thinking, oh my, Paul George has arrived. Paul George is this all-time great player, even as I think he may be a Hall of Famer. But if you put him in a higher level, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. And you will throughout his career because he's not that level of player.
Yeah, Skip Bayless go talk about he tired. I remember a guy, you remember 2013 when LeBron James led the playoffs in minutes?
Here we go again.
I'm just saying, but you're tired. We don't do tired.
I thought he was Iron Man.
Hold on. What about this? Would you say Paul George is Dame Lillard? Because when I told you Dame Lillard started wearing down after he got that 55, you said he can't be tired. So I just want to know, so how are we judging Paul George? Is he? I mean, how low on are we going as far as superstar?
I'd rather have Paul George than Damian Lillard.
Man, you out your mind.
No, I'm
you
not.
lost all your mind.
Take it.
Skip, if Neil O'Shea called the Clippers today and offered Damian Lillard for Paul George, man, Paul George would be on the plane to Portland before he could hang up the phone. You don't think so?
Yeah,
I
you
agree.
are all of your mind.
41, 13, and 6. Really?
Either way.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.